My name is Sutton. I am 17 years old. The night my life split into two distinct halves did not begin with a scream or a siren. It began with the delicate chime of a silver fork striking a crystal flute. I stood at the edge of the dining room in our sprawling colonial mansion in the suburbs of Connecticut. The air smelled of expensive white lilies and the heavy oaky scent of aged Chardonnay. To anyone looking through the floor-to-ceiling windows from the manicured lawn outside, we looked like the picture of the American dream. Inside, however, the air was so thick with pretension it was difficult to breathe. My mother, Eleanor, had decided to throw what she called a milestone celebration. Ostensibly, this was to celebrate two things. First, my father Harrison had just hit a massive revenue target at his investment firm. Second, my younger brother Brooks had just been accepted into one of the most prestigious preparatory schools on the East Coast. Both achievements were lies. I knew the revenue numbers were inflated. I had heard my father shouting into his phone late at night behind the closed doors of his study, moving money from one shell account to another to make the quarterly report look green instead of bloody red. And Brooks had grades that hovered in the low average range. His acceptance had been bought with a donation so large it could have paid off the mortgages of 3 families in the next town over. But tonight the truth did not matter. Tonight was about the performance. I smoothed the front of my dress. It was a simple black thing that was slightly too tight across the shoulders because it was 2 years old. While my mother wore a new silk gown that shimmered like liquid gold and Brooks wore a tailored blazer that cost more than my entire wardrobe, I was dressed to blend in with the catering staff. In fact, that was essentially my role. "Sutton, darling, check the wine glasses on the patio," my mother had hissed at me 20 minutes earlier, her smile never wavering as she waved at a neighbor. "And try not to look so sullen. You are ruining the aesthetic." So I did as I was told. I drifted through the crowd of men in dark suits and women in cocktail dresses, collecting empty plates and refilling glasses. I was a ghost in my own home. I was the invisible girl. "Exciting news about Brooks," a woman with a face pulled tight by surgery said to me as I poured wine into her glass. She did not look at my face. She looked at the wine. "Your parents must be relieved to have one child on the right track." "Yes," I said quietly. "They are very happy." I felt the crinkle of paper in the pocket of my apron. It was a letter I had received 2 days ago. I had been accepted into the state university with a partial academic scholarship. It was real. It was earned. It was the result of sleepless nights and studying until my eyes burned. But I had not told anyone. I kept it folded in my pocket like a secret weapon because I knew exactly what they would say. Harrison would call it a school for the mediocrity of the world. Eleanor would ask how she was supposed to tell her friends her daughter was going to a public university. I moved toward the main table. The crystal chandelier above cast fractured rainbows across the white tablecloths. It illuminated the faces of my father's colleagues and their wives. They were all laughing too loud. They were all eating the expensive canapes with a hunger that felt predatory. Brooks was holding court near the fireplace. He looked like a miniature version of our father. He held a glass of sparkling cider that he pretended was champagne, laughing at a joke a senior partner had made. He looked confident. He looked loved. I felt a familiar ache in my chest. It was not jealousy exactly. It was the ache of understanding my place in the hierarchy. Brooks was the asset. I was the liability. Then came the sound. Clink, clink, clink. The room went silent. The hum of conversation died down. All eyes turned toward the head of the table. My mother stood up. She looked radiant and terrifying. She held her glass high, the light catching the diamond rings on her fingers. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor said. Her voice was smooth practice, the voice of a woman who knew exactly how to command a room. "Tonight is a night of gratitude. Harrison and I have worked so hard to build this life, to build a legacy that we can be proud of." There were murmurs of agreement. A few people clapped softly. "We are so proud of Harrison for his vision." She continued, looking adoringly at my father. He nodded, adjusting his tie, looking every inch the master of the universe. "And we are so proud of Brooks for taking the next step toward his brilliant future." Brooks beamed. He took a small bow, playing the part of the Golden Prince perfectly. Then my mother turned her eyes toward me. I was standing near the sideboard holding a heavy silver tray loaded with empty glasses. I tried to shrink back into the shadows, but her gaze pinned me in place. "And of course," she said, her smile widening until it showed too many teeth, "we have to acknowledge everyone in the family." She motioned for me to come closer. I hesitated. "Come here, Sutton," she said. The tone was light, but underneath was a command that brooked no refusal. "Come stand with us." I walked forward. My legs felt heavy. I stood beside her chair. She reached out and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. To the room, it looked like a maternal embrace, but I felt her fingernails dig into the soft flesh of my upper arm. She squeezed hard enough to bruise. It was a warning. "Stand still. Take it." "You know," Eleanor said to the room, giving me a little shake, "people always ask us how we managed to get such a perfect son like Brooks." Laughter rippled through the room. "And I always tell them," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was amplified by the silence, "that you have to have a practice run first." The laughter grew louder. My stomach turned over. I stared at a water stain on the hardwood floor. "This is Sutton," she announced, tightening her grip on my shoulder until I almost winced. "Our wonderful mistake." The air left the room for me. I stopped breathing. "Truly," she went on, caught up in the rhythm of her own cruelty playing to her audience. "She is the surprise we never planned for. 1% talent, 99% accident." The room exploded. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was a roar. Men threw their heads back. Women covered their mouths to hide their giggles. They looked at me, the girl in the ill-fitting dress, the girl with the tray, and they saw a punchline. I looked at my father. Surely he would stop this. He cared about image more than anything. Harrison swirled his wine, looking at me with a smirk that mirrored my mother's. He pointed his fork in my direction. "She is the one investment I cannot seem to cut my losses on," he said. "The returns are terrible, but the overhead keeps rising." More laughter. Someone actually wiped a tear from their eye. It was hilarious. It was the funniest thing they had heard all night. A 17-year-old girl being flayed alive by the people who were supposed to protect her. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The humiliation was a physical heat rising up my neck, burning my cheeks. I looked at Brooks, my little brother, the boy I had protected from bullies on the playground when we were small, the boy I had helped with his homework when our parents were too busy attending galas. He was looking at me, and for a second I saw hesitation in his eyes. Then he looked at our parents. He saw their approval. He saw the crowd laughing. He made a choice. "Yeah," Brooks said, his voice cracking slightly before he found his confidence. "Sutton is just the rough draft. You know, before Mom and Dad created the masterpiece." He gestured to himself. That was the moment. That was the exact second the last thread connecting me to this family snapped. It made a sound only I could hear. It sounded like a bone breaking. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw Eleanor desperate for validation, using her daughter as a prop for a cheap laugh. I saw Harrison, a fraud in a $3,000 suit, bullying a child to feel powerful. I saw Brooks, weak and malleable, selling his soul for a pat on the head. I did not cry. I felt the tears prickling behind my eyes, hot and demanding, but I forced them back. I would not give them that satisfaction. I would not be the weeping victim in their comedy. The grip on my shoulder loosened as my mother reached for her wine glass, expecting me to slink away in shame. Instead, I stepped back. I was still holding the heavy silver tray in my left hand. On it sat 3 empty crystal flutes and 1 half-full glass of deep red Cabernet Sauvignon. I looked straight into my mother's eyes. The smile on her face faltered when she saw the expression on mine. It wasn't sadness. It was a cold, absolute clarity. I lifted the tray slightly, then let it tilt. Gravity took over. The tray slid from my fingers. It hit the edge of the table with a deafening crash. Crystals shattered. Shards flew outward, catching the light like diamonds. But the real statement was the wine. The glass of Cabernet exploded across the pristine snow-white tablecloth. The dark red liquid splashed outwards, soaking into the fabric, looking for all the world like a fresh arterial wound. It splattered onto the white flowers. It sprayed across the front of my mother's gold silk dress. The room went dead silent. The laughter was cut off as if by a guillotine. "Sutton!" my mother shrieked, jumping back and clutching her stained dress. "What is wrong with you? Look what you did!" My father stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You clumsy little—" He started stepping toward me. I did not flinch. I did not apologize. I did not rush to grab a napkin to dab at the stain. I stood amidst the wreckage of their perfect dinner, the red stain spreading wider and wider between us. It was a boundary line. It was a war declaration. I looked at Harrison. I looked at Eleanor. I looked at Brooks, whose mouth was hanging open. "You think this is funny," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence of the room it carried to every corner. It was steady. It was steel. "You think I'm a joke. Go to your room," my father barked, pointing a shaking finger at the stairs. "Get out of my sight before I really lose my temper." "I am going," I said, "but I am not going to my room." I reached into my apron pocket and touched the acceptance letter one last time. I realized I did not need to show them. They did not deserve to know. They did not deserve my achievements, my potential, or my future. I took a breath, inhaling the scent of spilled wine and expensive perfume. "You will regret saying that out loud," I said. I looked at the guests, meeting the gazes of the people who had laughed. They looked away, suddenly uncomfortable, suddenly realizing that the joke had turned into something ugly. "All of you," I added. Then I turned my back on them. I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I walked past the grand staircase where we used to take Christmas photos. I walked past the library where I was never allowed to disturb my father. I heard my mother shouting my name behind me, her voice shrill and demanding. I heard Brooks asking if the wine would come out of his blazer. I did not stop. I did not look back. I walked straight to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cool Connecticut night. The air was fresh and clean. It smelled of rain and wet earth, not lilies and lies. I had nothing but the clothes on my back, $42 in cash, stashed in a shoebox upstairs that I would grab on my way out, and a burning white-hot coal of rage in my chest. They called me a mistake. I would show them just how expensive a mistake could be. I moved through the hallway of the house like an intruder. The echo of my own footsteps on the plush carpet felt deafening in my ears. Downstairs, the party was still churning. I could hear the muffled sounds of laughter and the clinking of glass that had resumed after my departure. They had simply stepped over the mess I made. They had called a maid to scrub the wine from the floor, and they had moved on to the main course. My bedroom felt like a museum exhibit dedicated to a girl I no longer recognized. The walls were painted a soft beige that my mother had selected because it was neutral and resale-friendly. I did not turn on the light. I did not want to see the emptiness. I went straight to the closet. I bypassed the row of stiff cocktail dresses and the sensible blouses my mother insisted I wear for family portraits. I grabbed a worn canvas backpack from the top shelf. It was the only thing I owned that felt durable. I worked with the efficiency of a soldier breaking camp. I stripped off the black dress that smelled of the party and pulled on a pair of dark jeans and a thick gray hoodie. I shoved 3 t-shirts and fresh underwear into the bag. Then I knelt by the bed and pulled out the shoebox I kept hidden beneath the frame. Inside was my escape fund. Escape. It was pathetic. I counted the bills with trembling fingers. $42. It was a mix of birthday money from a distant aunt and change I had scrounged over the last 6 months. $42 to restart a life. I looked at my desk. My sketchbook lay there. It was a heavy, black-bound book filled with charcoal drawings and fashion concepts that my father called doodles and my mother called a waste of time. I shoved it into the backpack. It was heavy, but leaving it behind felt like leaving a limb. Next to the sketchbook sat my art supply case. I opened it and took out the only weapon I had. It was a silver X-Acto knife with a fresh blade. I capped it and slid it into the front pocket of my jeans. It was a tool for cutting fabric and paper, but tonight it felt like the only thing standing between me and the world. I walked out of the room. I did not make my bed. I did not leave a note. Notes were for people who wanted to be found. I slipped out the side door near the kitchen to avoid the guests. The cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in 17 years, I felt the terrifying weight of total freedom. The walk to the bus station took 40 minutes. The heels of my boots clicked against the pavement of our wealthy subdivision. I walked past gated driveways and security cameras. I walked until the manicured lawns gave way to the cracked sidewalks of the downtown district. The bus station was a concrete block that smelled of diesel fumes and stale urine. It was the place where the illusion of our town ended and reality began. I walked up to the ticket counter. The woman behind the glass looked tired. She had deep circles under her eyes, and she was chewing gum with a slow, rhythmic motion. "1 ticket to New York City," I said. My voice sounded thin in the cavernous room. "One way or round trip?" she asked without looking up. "One way," I said. "That will be $38, she said. I hesitated. I had $42 in cash. If I spent $38 on the ticket, I would arrive in the city with $4 to my name. That was suicide. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the emergency credit card my father had given me 2 years ago. It was a platinum card linked to his main account. He had given it to me with a lecture about responsibility. For emergencies only, Sutton, he had said, "If you are stranded or in danger," I was stranded, I was in danger. This was an emergency. I slid the card under the glass. The woman swiped it. I held my breath. She frowned and swiped it again. Then she looked at the screen and typed something. "Card is declined," she said flatly. The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. "Try it again," I said. "Please, there must be a mistake. The limit is high." "I tried it twice," she said, pushing the card back to me. "It says card reported lost or stolen. Account frozen by primary holder." I stared at the piece of plastic in my hand. He knew. He had not just sent me to my room. He had anticipated this. As soon as I walked out that door, Harrison had called the credit card company. He had cut off my lifeline. He wanted me to get to this counter and realize I was helpless. He wanted me to turn around and walk back home. He wanted me to crawl into the house and beg for forgiveness so he could look down at me and say, "I told you so." He wanted me to admit that I was nothing without his money. I felt a surge of nausea. The control was absolute. He was squeezing my throat from 5 miles away. "You want the ticket or not?" the woman asked. "I have a line." There was no one behind me. I looked at the card. It was useless plastic. I put it back in my pocket. I looked at my $42. If I bought the ticket, I would starve in the city. If I stayed here, I was trapped in his orbit. "No," I said. "Thank you." I walked away from the counter. I sat on a hard plastic bench in the corner of the station. I needed a plan. I needed to think. But my brain was a fog of panic and exhaustion. It was nearly midnight. The station was quiet, but it was a dangerous quiet. A man was watching me from the opposite wall. He was wearing a leather jacket that had seen better days, and he had a toothpick rolling between his lips. He pushed off the wall and started walking toward me. I gripped my backpack. "You look like you missed your ride, sweetheart," he said. His voice was like gravel. He stopped 2 feet away from my knees. He was too close. "I am fine," I said. I did not look at his eyes. I looked at his boots. They were heavy and reinforced. "You do not look fine," he said. "You look like a girl with nowhere to go. A girl like you should not be sitting here alone. Why don't you come with me? I have a car outside. I can take you somewhere warm." The code in his words was clear. He saw a teenage girl with a nice haircut and expensive shoes sitting alone in a bus station at midnight. He saw prey. I said, "I'm fine." I said louder this time. He laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. He reached out and his hand closed around my wrist. His skin was rough and greasy. "Don't be difficult," he said. "I'm just trying to help." The fear that had been paralyzing me suddenly vanished. It was replaced by the same cold clarity I had felt in the dining room. I was done being handled. I was done being grabbed. I jerked my hand back, but he held on tight. With my free hand, I reached into my jeans pocket. I pulled out the X-Acto knife. I used my thumb to slide the blade up. It clicked into place with a sharp metallic snap. I slammed the hand holding the knife down onto the plastic bench between us. The tip of the blade dug deep into the hard blue plastic, just inches from his fingers. He flinched and let go of my wrist. I looked up at him. I did not scream. I did not cry. "Touch me again," I said, "and the next one goes in your throat." He looked at the knife. It was small, but the blade was razor-sharp and surgical. Then he looked at my face. He saw the girl who had just destroyed a $3,000 dinner party without blinking. He saw someone who had nothing left to lose. He held up his hands and took a step back. "Crazy bitch," he muttered. "Fine, stay here and rot." He turned and walked away quickly, disappearing through the glass doors. My hand was shaking as I retracted the blade. I could not stay here. It was not safe. I grabbed my bag and ran out the side exit. I walked for an hour. The temperature dropped and the wind cut through my hoodie. I was in the industrial part of town now. Warehouses and auto repair shops lined the streets. I saw a flickering neon sign 2 blocks down, the Night Owl Diner. It looked grim. The windows were greasy, and the sign buzzed with the sound of a dying fly. But it had light, and hopefully it had heat. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and frying bacon grease. The place was empty except for a trucker asleep in a back booth. A young man was wiping down the counter. He looked to be about 20 years old. He had messy dark hair and wore a stained white apron over a black t-shirt. He looked up as I walked in. His eyes scanned me. He saw the backpack. He saw the hoodie. He saw the exhaustion. "Kitchen is closed," he said. He did not smile. "And we have a no loitering policy. Unless you are buying, you are leaving." My heart sank. I walked to the counter. "I just need hot water," I said. "Please, it is freezing outside." "Water is for paying customers," he said. He tossed the rag into a bucket of gray water. "Look, I know the drill. You are a runaway or a junkie or both. I don't want trouble. My boss will fire me if he sees you crashing here." "I am not a junkie," I said. "They all say that," he replied. "Door is behind you." He turned his back on me to stack some mugs. I stood there. I could leave. I could go back out into the cold and risk running into the man from the station, or I could prove my worth. I sat on a stool. I pulled a paper napkin from the dispenser. I reached into my bag and grabbed a charcoal pencil. I looked at the guy. I looked at the way his apron hung on him. It was poorly designed. The straps pulled at the neck. I started to draw. My hand moved fast. I sketched the lines of a structured jacket. I added sharp lapels and a hidden pocket detail. I shaded the texture of the fabric, making it look heavy and protective. It was one of the designs I had been working on in secret. It was armor. The guy turned back around holding a pot of coffee. He saw me still sitting there. "I said get out," he said. Then he looked down at the napkin. He stopped. He put the coffee pot down slowly. He leaned over the counter to get a better look. "What is that?" he asked. "It is a design," I said without looking up. I added a final hard line to the collar. "For a jacket. Better than the one you are wearing." I pushed the napkin toward him. The charcoal was dark and stark against the white paper. The drawing had energy. It looked like it was moving. He picked it up. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at me. His expression changed. The cynicism in his eyes softened into curiosity. "You drew this just now?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I will trade it to you for a piece of toast and hot water." He looked at the drawing again. He folded the napkin carefully and put it in his apron pocket. "Sit down," he said. He went to the back. A minute later he came back with a plate. It had 2 slices of toast with butter and a side of scrambled eggs. He placed a mug of steaming tea next to it. "I am Wyatt," he said. "Sutton," I said. I ate the food so fast my stomach hurt. Wyatt watched me. He did not ask questions. He wiped the counter around me, creating a small island of clean space. When I was done, he took the plate. "You have nowhere to go," he stated. It was not a question. "No," I said. He sighed. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3 a.m. "My shift ends at 6, he said. "The owner comes in at 7. If he finds you, he will call the cops. He pointed a thumb toward a heavy metal door at the back of the kitchen. "That is dry storage," he said. "There are no beds, just sacks of rice and flour. It is warm, and it locks from the inside." I looked at the door. "Why?" I asked. "Because that drawing is not something a junkie makes," he said, "and because it is 20 degrees outside." I walked into the storage room. It was small and smelled of dust and dry grains. There were 50-pound bags of rice stacked on wooden pallets. I climbed onto the stack of rice bags. They were lumpy and hard. I curled up in my hoodie, pulling my knees to my chest. 5 hours ago, I had been standing in a mansion surrounded by crystal and silk. I had a soft bed with Egyptian cotton sheets waiting for me. Now I was sleeping on a bag of long-grain rice in the back of a greasy diner. I closed my eyes. My back hurt. My feet were cold. I was terrified. But as I drifted into a restless sleep, I realized something. The credit card was declined. The door was locked. The money was gone. But I was free. I whispered into the darkness, "I will never go back." 4 years is a long time to hold your breath. I was 21 years old now. My life was a series of frantic transitions between two very different worlds. By day, I was a student at the City Community College design program. By night, I was a waitress at the diner where Wyatt had first fed me toast. I smelled perpetually of stale coffee and turpentine. I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But I also had a portfolio that was thicker than the Bible and twice as heavy. The design program was not prestigious. It was a gritty, underfunded department housed in a concrete basement that smelled of mildew. However, it was the only place that would take a girl with a GED and a stolen X-Acto knife. I sat in the back of the studio classroom. I was stitching a piece of raw denim with thick red thread. My hands were scarred from needle pricks and burns from the steam iron. "Sutton," a voice dripped from the front of the room, "please bring your piece forward." Professor Sterling stood by the critique wall. She was a woman in her 50s who wore Chanel scarves to hide her neck and judged her students based on their zip codes rather than their talent. She was an old acquaintance of my mother. I knew this because I had seen her at the Christmas parties of my childhood. She did not recognize me. To her, I was just another scholarship case from the wrong side of the tracks. I walked up to the front. I pinned my jacket to the wall. It was a piece I called Scars. It was a deconstructed wool blazer. I had slashed the fabric and stitched it back together with gold thread. It was meant to look like a wound that had healed into something beautiful. It was aggressive. It was personal. Professor Sterling pursed her lips. She looked at the jacket like it was a roadkill carcass. "It is aggressive," she said. She did not mean it as a compliment. "It lacks refinement. Fashion is about fantasy, Sutton. It is about aspiration. This looks like something one would wear to a riot. It is too prickly. It is too guy." She waved her hand, dismissing me. "Next," she called. "Julian." Julian Van Doren walked up. He was 22 years old. He had blonde hair that flopped over his forehead and a smile that cost $5,000 in orthodontics. He was a carbon copy of my brother Brooks. He drove a Porsche to a community college and paid others to sew his hems. He pinned his jacket to the wall. My breath stopped in my throat. It was my jacket. It was not similar. It was identical, the same cut, the same deconstructed lapel. The only difference was the fabric. Instead of my rough wool, he had used a sleek, expensive cashmere, and instead of my jagged gold stitching, he had used a subtle, invisible hem. "Now this," Professor Sterling said, clapping her hands together, "this is what I am talking about. Look at the lines. It has that raw urban energy, but it is polished. It is sophisticated. It is palatable to the upper class. Excellent work, Julian." I stared at him. Julian smirked at me. It was a small, subtle twitch of his lips. He knew. I had left my sketchbook in the studio last week. I had found it moved to a different table. I had thought nothing of it. Now I realized he had photographed my patterns. He had taken the soul of my work and sanitized it for the wealthy. "That is my design," I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. Professor Sterling sighed. She looked at me with pity. "Sutton," she said, We do not make accusations without proof. Julian has been working on this concept all semester. Perhaps you were inspired by him. Great minds think alike. He stole the pattern, I said. He cannot even drape a skirt. How did he construct a complex blazer? Enough, she snapped. Sit down. Do not let your jealousy become unbecoming. Julian will be presenting this as the finale piece at the student showcase on Friday. You should take notes. I sat down. I did not scream. I did not throw my scissors at Julian's head. I sat there and felt the cold, familiar clarity settle over me. They wanted refinement. I would give them a lesson in brutality. Friday arrived. The student showcase was the biggest event of the year. Local donors and minor press representatives gathered in the college atrium. It was a chance for students to get internships. The backstage area was chaos. Steamers hissed. Models ran around half naked. Julian was holding court near the main rack. He was laughing with his friends, sipping a sparkling water. His jacket hung on the star mannequin in the center of the prep area, waiting for the judge's final inspection before the runway walk. I watched from the shadows. I was wearing my waitress uniform, black pants, and a black shirt because I had a shift immediately after. I was invisible. Julian left the area to flirt with a girl from the graphic design department. The coast was clear for 2 minutes. I moved. I walked up to the mannequin. The cashmere jacket looked soft and expensive. It was beautiful. It was a lie. I reached into my pocket. I did not have a weapon. I had a sewing kit. I did not cut the jacket. That would be vandalism. That would get me expelled. I needed to do something permanent. I needed to do something that proved ownership. I flipped the jacket open. The lining was a pristine white silk. It was flawless. I pulled out a pre-made patch of fabric I had prepared the night before. It was a piece of rough canvas. On it, I had embroidered words in thick black thread. I used a curved surgical needle. I worked with a speed that blurred my fingers. I whip-stitched the canvas patch directly onto the center of the white silk lining. I did not hide my stitches. I made them large and crude and impossible to remove without destroying the delicate silk. I finished. I buttoned the jacket back up. It looked perfect from the outside. I slipped back into the shadows just as Julian returned. 10 minutes later, the judges arrived. They were a group of 3 local boutique owners. Professor Sterling led them. She was beaming. "And this," she announced, stopping in front of Julian's mannequin, "is our showstopper. Julian Van Doren has created a piece that truly elevates the program." The lead judge stepped forward. He was a man with glasses and a critical eye. He reached out to touch the cashmere. "The fabric is exquisite," he said. "Let us see the construction." He unbuttoned the jacket. He grabbed the lapels and pulled it open to inspect the lining. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. There, in the center of the pristine white silk, was my rough, ugly canvas patch. The black embroidery screamed at them. "Cheap knockoff. Original design by Sutton." Professor Sterling gasped. She put a hand to her throat. "What is this?" the judge asked. He leaned in closer. "Is this part of the statement?" Julian turned pale. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. He had never checked the inside of the jacket because he had not made it. He did not know the lining from the shell. Julian stammered. "I don't know. Someone sabotaged me." "It is stitched into the silk," the judge observed. "It looks structural. And who is Sutton?" I stepped out from the shadows. I was still wearing my waitress blacks. I looked poor. I looked tired. But I held my head high. "I am Sutton," I said. "And that is my pattern. He copied the shell, but he forgot that a design has to have a soul. I just put the soul back in." The judge looked at me. Then he looked at Julian, who was sweating through his expensive shirt. Then he looked at Professor Sterling, who looked like she wanted to vomit. "It is a bold move," the judge said. A small smile touched his lips. "It is punk rock. I like it." He turned to Julian. "If you cannot make your own clothes, son," he said, "you should at least check the pockets before you steal them." The humiliation was absolute. Julian fled the room. Professor Sterling tried to stammer an excuse, but the damage was done. The judges walked past her toward my rack. I felt a presence beside me. I turned. A girl was leaning against a garment rack watching the scene with a dark, amused expression. She had sharp, bobbed black hair and wore a suit that looked like it was cut from shark skin. She held a plastic cup of cheap wine. "That was vicious," she said. "It was necessary," I replied. "He is going to try to get you expelled, you know," she said. "Rich boys do not like losing." "Let him try," I said. "I have the original sketches time-stamped in my email." The girl extended a hand. Her grip was firm. "I am Blair," she said. "I am in the pre-law program. I plan on suing people like him for a living one day. We should be friends." I shook her hand. "I am Sutton," I said. "And I think I'm going to need a lawyer." Blair laughed. It was a sharp sound like glass breaking. "Stick with me, Sutton," she said. "We are going to burn this whole city down." I looked at the mannequin, where my jacket still hung open, exposing the truth to the world. I felt the first real spark of hope I had felt in 4 years. I was not just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. And for the first time I had an ally who liked the sight of blood just as much as I did. While I was stitching my fingers to the bone in a damp basement studio, fighting for every inch of respect I could earn, my family was busy rotting from the inside out. I did not know the details at the time. I was too busy trying to turn electricity back on and eating stale bagels to pay attention to the gossip columns. But later, when the indictments came down and the depositions were leaked, I learned exactly what was happening behind the manicured hedges of my childhood home during those lost years. It turns out that maintaining the illusion of perfection is far more expensive than simply being perfect. My father, Harrison, had always been a man who believed that money was a liquid concept. It flowed where he directed it. But 4 years after I left, the flow had stopped and the drought had begun. The legitimate investments were drying up. The market was shifting away from his conservative slow-growth strategies toward tech and innovation sectors he did not understand and refused to learn about. Instead of adapting, Harrison decided to invent his own reality. He created a shell company called Blue Water Holdings. On paper, it was a revolutionary real estate development firm focusing on luxury eco-resorts in the Caribbean. The brochures were glossy and thick. The architectural renderings were breathtaking. He hosted seminars in hotel ballrooms where he stood on stage with a microphone and charmed dentists and retired teachers out of their pension funds. "The ground floor," he would tell them, with that winning, trustworthy smile I knew so well. "This is where generational wealth is built." There was no ground floor. There was no ground. There was not even an island. Blue Water Holdings was a classic Ponzi scheme. He used the money from new investors to pay dividends to the old ones and to fund his own exorbitant lifestyle. He leased a new Bentley. He upgraded his membership at the country club to the platinum tier. He bought my mother diamond earrings that cost more than my tuition for 4 years. But the math of a lie is unforgiving. You always need more blood to keep the beast alive. When the new investors slowed down, Harrison did not cut back. He panicked. I learned later from court documents that he started meeting with men who did not work in glass offices. He met them in the back rooms of cigar bars and in parking lots of diners off the highway. These were men who lent money at 30% interest and took collateral in the form of kneecaps. He borrowed $50,000, then $100,000. He told himself it was a bridge loan. He told himself the big deal was just around the corner. He sat in his study late at night, staring at spreadsheets that bled red ink, drinking scotch, until his hands stopped shaking long enough to sign another fraudulent check. He was drowning, and he was convinced that if he just wore a nice enough suit, the water would not dare to enter his lungs. My mother, Eleanor, was handling her own descent with equal grace. If Harrison was addicted to power, Eleanor was addicted to admiration. She needed to be the envy of every woman in her social circle. She needed to be the queen bee. But being the queen required a hive, and hives required honey. She became the chairwoman of the annual Sterling Charity Gala. It was supposed to raise money for underprivileged children in the city arts program. It was a noble cause on paper. In reality, it was Eleanor's personal piggy bank. She threw herself into the planning with a manic energy. She booked the most expensive venue in the state. She ordered flowers that had to be flown in from Holland. She hired a private chef to create a menu of truffle risotto and Wagyu beef. "It has to be spectacular," she told her committee. "We have to show the world that we care." She cared deeply about herself. She set up a consulting fee for her services as the organizer. She expensed her wardrobe for the event, billing the charity for 3 different couture gowns because she needed options. She categorized a 2-week trip to Paris as a sourcing expedition for auction items. She walked along the Seine eating macarons and buying vintage Chanel bags with money that was supposed to buy paintbrushes and violins for kids who had nothing. She posted photos of herself in front of the Eiffel Tower with captions about the burden of philanthropy. Exhausted but inspired, she wrote. "Giving back is the greatest gift." She skimmed 15% off the top of every donation. She justified it to herself, I am sure. She probably told herself she deserved it for all her hard work. She probably told herself that the charity would not even exist without her brilliance. She looked in the mirror and saw a saint while the reflection showed a thief in silk. And then there was Brooks, my golden brother, the masterpiece, the heir apparent. While I was fighting Julian for a scrap of recognition, Brooks was busy snorting his tuition up his nose in a dorm room 3 states away. He had arrived at his prestigious university, not as a student, but as a celebrity. He had money. He had a car. He had the arrogant charm of a boy who had never been told no in his life. He did not go to class. He went to parties. And when the parties were not enough, he decided to become the supplier. He started small-selling Adderall to stressed engineering students during finals week. Then he moved to cocaine. He enjoyed the power of it. He liked being the guy everyone needed to know. He kept his stash in a hollowed-out textbook on economics, which was the only time he ever opened a book during his entire college career. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday morning in November. The campus police did a random sweep. They found 3 ounces of cocaine and $5,000 in cash in his desk drawer. It was enough for a felony charge. It was enough for prison time. It was enough to ruin a life. But Brooks did not have a life. He had a safety net woven from Harrison's checkbook. The call came to the house at 2 a.m. Harrison took it in his study. He did not scream. He did not lecture. He went into damage control mode. He flew to the campus the next morning. He met with the dean of students and the local police chief. He brought his lawyer and his checkbook. There was a substantial donation made to the university's new athletic center. There was a quiet agreement with the prosecutor to drop the charges in exchange for a diversion program and community service. There was a non-disclosure agreement signed by everyone involved. Brooks was expelled, of course, but the official record stated that he had withdrawn for personal health reasons. They brought him home. They did not punish him. They did not send him to rehab. They set him up in the guest wing of the mansion and bought him a new gaming computer to keep him occupied. "It was a misunderstanding," Eleanor told her friends over brunch. "The pressure was just too much for his sensitive soul. He needs time to find himself. He is a victim of his own brilliance, really." "Boys will be boys," Harrison said to his golf buddies. "He just got caught up with the wrong crowd. He is a good kid. He just needs a little direction." They coddled him. They wrapped him in cotton wool and denial. They taught him that consequences were for poor people. They taught him that no matter how big the mess, Daddy could always write a check to clean it up. They did not see that they were feeding a monster. They did not see that Brooks was becoming hollowed out by his own lack of accountability. They sat at their dinner table, eating meals prepared by a chef they could no longer afford, and toasted to their success. Harrison raised his glass of wine. "To family," he said. "To us," Eleanor replied. "To me," Brooks added, reaching for the bottle. They clinked their glasses. The crystal chimed. It was the same sound that had started the war between us 4 years ago. But now, the sound was thinner. It was brittle. It sounded like something that was about to shatter. I was miles away eating a sandwich made of discount turkey and stale bread, but I was the only one who was actually full. I was building a foundation of stone while they were dancing on a floor made of rotting wood. They thought they were untouchable. They thought the party would never end. They were wrong. The music was already slowing down and the bill was coming due. 8 years is enough time to reinvent yourself 3 times over if you have the stomach for it. I was 25 years old. The frightened girl who had slept on a bag of rice in a diner storage room was dead. In her place stood a woman who owned 40% of a rapidly growing fashion label. Our studio was located in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. It was a space of exposed brick and industrial windows that looked out over the gray skyline. It smelled of ozone from the steamers and the sharp, metallic tang of fresh dye. It was not a polite space. It was a war room. Wyatt was in the kitchenette area. He was no longer just a waiter working the graveyard shift. He was the executive chef of a bistro 2 blocks away, but tonight he was here. He was plating food for the models who were pacing nervously in their robes. "Eat," Wyatt commanded, sliding a plate of lean protein and vegetables toward a girl who looked like she might faint. "Sutton does not hire starving waifs. She hires warriors. You cannot march on an empty stomach." He looked at me and winked. He was my anchor. For 8 years, he had been the one steady thing in a world of shifting tides. Blair was pacing the floor with a tablet in her hand. She had cut her hair even shorter. She looked lethal in a suit of her own design. She handled the business side. She handled the contracts. She was the one who made sure that nobody stole a single stitch from us ever again. "The buyers from Bergdorf are here," Blair said. She did not look up from the screen. "The editor from Vogue is seated in the front row, and I just saw a representative from the Met Costume Institute." She stopped and looked at me. "Are you ready, Sutton?" she asked. "I have been ready since I was 17, I said. Tonight was the debut of my first full solo collection. I had named it The Mistake. It was not a subtle title. It was a direct challenge. It was a reclamation of the name my mother had given me in front of 50 people. The venue was not a hotel ballroom. We had rented an abandoned swimming pool in Queens. The tiles were cracked. The acoustics were echoing and hollow. The guests sat on simple wooden benches. There was no champagne. There were no flowers. The lights went down. There was no music. Instead, the sound system played a recording I had made. It was the sound of a silver tray hitting a hardwood floor, followed by the shattering of glass. It played on a loop. Crash, shatter, crash, shatter. The first model stepped out. She wore a gown made of white silk. But the silk was not pristine. It was dyed with a deep violet red that started at the waist and bled downward, mimicking the stain of spilled wine. The hem was tattered. The bodice was structured like a corset, but the seams were on the outside. They were raw and exposed, but it was the thread that caught the light. I had used a Japanese technique called kintsugi. It is the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. The philosophy is that the break is part of the history of the object rather than something to disguise. Every tear in the fabric, every raw seam was stitched back together with thick metallic gold thread. The model did not walk with a hip-swaying glide. She stomped. She wore heavy combat boots beneath the silk. She looked like she was fleeing a crime scene, or perhaps returning to burn the crime scene down. The audience gasped. The second look came out. It was a suit tailored from rough wool, similar to the one I had drawn on a napkin for Wyatt 8 years ago. But the back of the jacket was slashed open, revealing a lining embroidered with a map of the Rocky Mountains, the place where another mother might have abandoned a child. Attached to the wrist of every garment was a thick tag. It did not list the price. It did not list the fabric content. It listed a story. I was left in the woods at 16. I was told I was a waste of investment. I was called a mistake. I watched from the monitor backstage. I saw the editor from Vogue reach out and touch the hem of the wine-stained dress as it passed. I saw her pick up the tag. I saw her read it. I saw her hand fly to her mouth. The show ended not with a wave, but with a lineup of 20 models standing like an army staring down the elite of the fashion world. I walked out for my bow. I wore jeans and a black t-shirt. I did not smile. I did not wave. I looked at the camera at the end of the runway, and I nodded once. The applause was not polite. It was thunderous. It felt like the room was collapsing in on itself. By the next morning, the world had changed. I woke up in the loft apartment I shared with Wyatt. My phone was buzzing so hard it was vibrating off the nightstand. Blair was already in our kitchen drinking coffee and looking at her laptop with a predatory grin. "You might want to see this," she said. She turned the screen toward me. It was the homepage of the Vogue website. The headline was in bold, black letters. "Sutton Sterling gives a voice to the abandoned. The Mistake is a masterpiece." The article called me a prodigy. It called the collection a visceral scream against the sanitized perfection of modern luxury. It mentioned the kintsugi. It mentioned the tags. "Social media is melting down," Blair said, scrolling. "The hashtag #TheMistake is trending worldwide. People are posting their own stories of being the black sheep. You did not just sell clothes, Sutton. You started a movement." "What about the sales?" I asked. I was a businesswoman now. Movements were nice, but they did not pay the rent. "We sold out," Blair said. "Everything. The pre-orders for the gold-stitch blazers are backlogged for 6 months. The wine dress was bought by a museum in London." She paused for effect. "The estimated revenue from this launch alone is $2.4 million, she said. "Congratulations. You are officially a self-made millionaire." I sat down on the bar stool. $2 million. It was more money than my father had ever made in a legitimate year. It was safety. It was a wall of gold bricks between me and the world that had tried to crush me. Wyatt put a plate of eggs in front of me. He kissed the top of my head. "I knew it," he said softly. "Since the napkin." "We need to scale up," I said, my mind already racing. "We need a bigger production facility. We need to hire more seamstresses." "We will," Blair said. "But there is something else." Her tone changed. The triumph in her voice was replaced by a sharper, colder edge. She tapped her tablet and brought up a different window. It was a financial news site. It was not the front page, but it was there in the business section, buried under stock reports. Local investment firm under investigation for fraud. CEO Harrison Sterling faces asset seizure. I stared at the name. It looked small on the screen. "It started this morning," Blair said. "The rumors have been circulating for weeks, but the bank finally made a move. They froze the assets of Blue Water Holdings." "What does that mean for them?" I asked. "It means the house of cards is falling," Blair said. "The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings on the Connecticut estate. They have 30 days to pay the arrears, or the property goes to auction." I looked at the date on the article. It was today. The same day I became a millionaire, my parents were officially declared destitute. The irony was so sharp, it almost drew blood. "They do not have the liquid cash to save it," Blair continued. "Harrison leveraged everything, even his life insurance. They are going to lose the house, Sutton, the dining room, the library, all of it." I thought about the dining room. I thought about the white tablecloth and the red wine. I thought about the sound of my mother's laughter when she called me a mistake. "Let it burn," I said. "There is more," Blair said. "My contact at the courthouse says Harrison is trying to secure a high-risk loan to bail himself out. He is desperate. He is telling lenders that he has a silent partner coming in. He is dropping names." "What names?" I asked. "Yours," Blair said. "He is telling people that his daughter, the fashion phenomenon, is going to back him. He is using your success to try and buy himself time." Rage flared in my chest, hot and familiar. Even now, after 8 years of silence, he was trying to spend me. He was trying to use my name as currency. "He has not called me in 8 years," I said. "He will call soon," Blair said. "Hungry people always remember where the food is kept." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city. I felt the gold thread of my own success stitching my spine straighter. "Let him call," I said. "I want him to call. I want him to hear me say no." "They're going to come for you, Sutton," Wyatt said. He was leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. "They are drowning, and drowning people will climb on top of anyone to get a breath of air." "I know," I said, "but I am not the raft anymore. I am the ocean." I turned back to them. "Blair," I said, "monitor the foreclosure auction. I want to know exactly when that house goes on the block and get the paperwork ready for a blind trust." "You want to buy it?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I do not want to live in it," I said. "I want to own it. I want to hold the deed in my hand and know that the roof over their heads belongs to me. It is the ultimate receipt." Blair smiled. It was a shark's smile. "I will set it up," she said. I looked at the Vogue article again. The mistake is a masterpiece. My mother had labeled me to destroy me. She had branded me to make me small. She had no idea that she had given me the very weapon I would use to cut her out of history. The phone on the studio desk rang. It was a landline number we rarely gave out. Blair looked at the caller ID. She looked at me. "Area code 203, she said. "Connecticut." It had begun. Success has a specific smell. In our studio in Brooklyn, it smelled like fresh espresso and the crisp ozone scent of heavy cardstock being printed with invoices. It was the smell of validation. We were shipping units faster than we could make them. The mistake collection was not just a trend. It was a cultural moment. I was 25 years old and I felt untouchable. I should have known better. The bubble burst on a rainy Tuesday morning in November. It did not happen with a phone call from my father. It happened with a knock on the heavy steel door of our loading dock. I was inspecting a roll of Japanese denim with Wyatt. We were discussing the dye lot consistency for the next production run. The atmosphere was light. We were laughing about a review that had called my work the armor of the disenfranchised. "Delivery for Sutton Sterling," a voice called out. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the door. I expected a courier with fabric swatches or perhaps a late lunch order. Instead, I found a process server. He was a small man in a wet raincoat who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "Are you Sutton Sterling?" he asked. He did not make eye contact. "Yes," I said. He shoved a thick manila envelope into my hands. "You have been served," he mumbled. Then he turned and hurried back to his idling car. I stood there holding the envelope. It was heavy. It felt dense and malignant. My name was typed on the front in bold black letters. The return address was a law firm I did not recognize located in a strip mall in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The law offices of Miller & Finch. "What is that?" Wyatt asked, coming up behind me. "I think it is a lawsuit," I said. My voice was calm, but my pulse began to hammer a warning rhythm against my throat. I walked to the large cutting table in the center of the room. I cleared away the fabric shears and the pattern weights. I opened the envelope. I pulled out the stack of documents. The first page was a summons. Harrison Sterling and Eleanor Sterling plaintiffs versus Sutton Sterling and the Mistake brand, LLC defendants. I read the words, but my brain refused to process them. My parents were suing me. "Blair," I called out, "get out here." Blair emerged from her office. She was wearing oversized glasses and holding a tablet. She saw my face and the papers on the table. Her expression shifted instantly from casual to professional predator. "Do not tell me," she said. "The bank, my parents," I said. She dropped the tablet on a chair and walked over. She snatched the papers from the table. She began to read. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon with the speed of a machine. "Civil suit," she muttered. "Defamation of character, misappropriation of likeness, intentional infliction of emotional distress." She flipped a page. She stopped. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Oh, this is rich," she said. "This is absolutely rich." "What does it say?" I asked. I felt cold. The warmth of the studio had evaporated. "They are suing you for $5 million, Blair said. "They claim that your brand is built on their intellectual property. Specifically, they claim that the narrative of the mistake utilizes private family moments to generate profit without their consent. They are arguing that by calling yourself a mistake on a clothing tag, you are defaming their reputation as parents and causing them irreparable financial harm." "They called me a mistake," I said. "In front of 50 people. It is the truth." "Truth is a defense against libel," Blair agreed. "But wait, it gets better. Turn to page 12. I turned the page. Count 4 reimbursement for cost of upbringing and filial support. I stared at the paragraph. The words swam before my eyes. The plaintiffs assert that they provided housing, food, education, and medical care to the defendant for 17 years. As the defendant has now achieved significant financial success, while the plaintiffs face financial hardship, the plaintiffs invoke the doctrine of filial responsibility. Furthermore, the plaintiffs seek restitution for the investment made in the defendant's childhood, which has yielded no return on investment due to estrangement. "They want me to pay them back for raising me," I whispered. "They want a refund on their daughter." "It is a shakedown," Blair said. She threw the papers back onto the table with disgust. Connecticut does have filial responsibility laws, but they are archaic. They are almost exclusively used by the state to recover Medicaid costs for nursing homes. They are not designed for civil suits where wealthy parents blow their fortune on fraud and then demand their estranged daughter pay for their lifestyle. They want $5 million, I repeated. They are broke, Blair. They are losing the house. They are trying to use me as a piggy bank. They hired a bottom-feeder lawyer, Blair said, tapping a fingernail on the letterhead. Miller and Finch. These guys chase ambulances and handle slip-and-fall cases at grocery stores. No reputable firm would touch this. This is a Hail Mary pass. They are throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if anything sticks. I felt a wave of nausea. It was not fear. It was a deep, curdling revulsion. I thought about the night at the bus station. I thought about the $42. I thought about the years of silence. And now, because I had clawed my way out of the dirt, they felt entitled to the fruit of my labor. They are claiming I owe them, I said. For the food I ate, for the roof over my head, for the clothes on my back. They are desperate, Wyatt said. He put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was warm and grounding. This is not a legal strategy, Sutton. This is a tantrum. They are drowning and they are trying to drag you down with them. It is worse than a tantrum, Blair said. It is strategic emotional terrorism. They know this case will likely get thrown out of court, but they are counting on two things. One is that you will be terrified of the bad publicity. A lawsuit involving family is messy. It looks bad to investors. It looks bad to Vogue. She looked at me, her eyes hard and serious. And two, she continued, they are counting on the fact that you might still crave their approval enough to pay them to go away. They think you are weak. They think you are still the 17-year-old girl who ran away. They want a settlement. They want you to write them a check for $500,000 just to make this disappear. I looked at the lawsuit. I looked at the signatures at the bottom. Harrison Sterling, Eleanor Sterling. The handwriting was familiar. It was the same handwriting that used to sign my report cards without looking at the grades. They were treating me like a bad investment. They had said it that night at the party. The one investment I cannot seem to cut my losses on. Now they were trying to cash out. They want $5 million, I said. They will settle for $50,000, Blair said. Or even 10. They just want cash, Sutton. They are bleeding. I walked to the window. I looked out at the gray sky. I thought about the combat boots on my models. I thought about the gold thread stitching the wound shut. If I paid them, they would go away. I could write a check today and not even feel it. My accountant would call it a nuisance fee. I could save myself the headache. I could save my brand the scandal. But that money would go to the very people who had watched me walk out into the night and locked the door behind me. That money would validate their delusion. It would tell them that I owed them. It would tell them that my success was theirs to harvest. I turned back to the room. No, I said. No what? Blair asked. No settlement, I said. Not a dime, not a penny, not a single thread. Blair smiled. It was the smile of a wolf seeing a lamb bare its teeth. I was hoping you would say that, she said. They want a fight, I said. Fine, I will give them a war. They are suing me for emotional distress. I want to countersue. On what grounds? Blair asked, leaning forward. Everything, I said. Constructive abandonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress starting from the night of the party, fraud. I want to sue them for the credit card Harrison gave me and then canceled when I was stranded at a bus station at midnight. That was endangerment. That is a stretch, Blair said. The statute of limitations on some of that is tricky. I do not care if we win money, I said. I want to bury them in paperwork. I want to depose them. I want to put Harrison on a stand under oath and ask him about Blue Water Holdings. I want to ask Eleanor about the charity funds. I want to make this the most expensive mistake they ever made. Litigation is expensive, Blair warned. It will cost us hundreds of thousands in legal fees. It will take time away from the design work. I have the money, I said. And I have the time. They do not. Harrison is broke. He cannot afford a long legal battle. He hired a cheap lawyer on contingency. If we drag this out. If we bury them in motions and discovery requests, their lawyer will quit because he is not getting paid. We bleed them out, Wyatt said. We bleed them out, I confirmed. I picked up the lawsuit. I felt the weight of it again. But this time it did not feel malignant. It felt like an opportunity. They had made a critical error. They had assumed that the Sutton they were suing was the daughter they had raised. They forgot that I had raised myself, and the mother who raised me was the streets of New York City. She taught me that you do not pay extortionists. You break them. Blair, I said, draft the response, deny everything, and file the countersuit. I want to sue for court costs and legal fees too. I want to make sure that when this is over, they owe me. Consider it done, Blair said. I will have the draft ready by tonight. We will file in the morning. And one more thing, I said. What? Blair asked. Find out who the judge is, I said. I want to know if he wears bespoke suits or off the rack. I want to know everything about this courtroom before I walk into it. You are scary when you are angry, Wyatt said. He was smiling. I am not angry, I said. I dropped the lawsuit into the recycling bin. I am inspired. The legal strike had been meant to cripple me. It had been meant to remind me of my place. Instead, it had reminded me of who I was. I was the girl who had survived the winter in a storage closet. I was the girl who had sewn her own armor. Harrison and Eleanor Sterling thought they were fighting a daughter. They were about to find out they were fighting a CEO. And this CEO did not offer refunds. We thought the battlefield would be a courtroom. We prepared for depositions and discovery motions. We organized boxes of financial records and prepared timelines of neglect. We treated it like a clean fight where the weapon of choice was the law. We forgot that a cornered animal does not fight clean. It bites, it scratches. And when it realizes it cannot win by strength, it aims for the jugular. 3 days after we filed our aggressive countersuit, the atmosphere in the studio was electric. We felt vindicated. We felt like we were finally taking control of the narrative. Blair was drafting a press release that would frame the lawsuit as a frivolous attempt at extortion. Wyatt was testing a new menu for the launch party of our spring line. Then the phone rang. It was not the landline this time. It was Blair's personal cell phone. She looked at the screen and frowned. It is our publicist, she said. She never calls this early unless something is on fire. Blair answered. She listened for 10 seconds. The color drained from her face so completely that her skin looked like parchment. She did not say a word. She just looked at me with eyes wide with horror. Send me the link, Blair whispered. She hung up. What is it? I asked. I stopped pinning the hem of a dress. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavy and suffocating. Blair did not answer. She walked to her laptop and typed furiously. Then she turned the screen toward me. It was not a legal document. It was the homepage of the Daily Informer. It was a trashy tabloid site known for breathless headlines and invasive paparazzi shots. But it had millions of readers. The headline took up half the screen. Fashion's Fraud. The Dark Secret Life of Sutton Sterling. Below the headline was a photo. It was grainy and blurry, but clearly old. It showed a teenage girl who looked vaguely like me, looking disheveled and angry at a gas station. It was a photo taken out of context. It was a photo from a road trip I had taken with friends years ago, where we had been caught in a rainstorm. But here, under the harsh glare of the headline, I looked like a junkie. Read the byline, Blair said. Her voice was flat. Source close to the family. I sat down and began to read. The story was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed that the narrative of the mistake was a fabrication designed to sell clothes. It claimed that I had not been abandoned. It claimed that I had run away because my parents had tried to stage an intervention for my severe drug addiction. According to her brother Brooks Sterling, the article read, Sutton was a troubled youth who stole from her parents and terrorized the household. We tried everything to help her, rehab, therapy, tough love, but she chose the streets. My parents spent 8 years looking for her. They hired private investigators. They wept every Christmas. To see her now claiming she was the victim is the ultimate betrayal. He sold me out, I whispered. Brooks. He did not just sell you out, Wyatt said, reading over my shoulder. He rewrote history. He took every sin he ever committed, the drugs, the stealing, the lying, and he projected them onto you. He is using your silence against you. I scrolled down. It got worse. There were quotes from family friends who described my parents as saints who had sacrificed everything for their difficult daughter. There were anecdotes about my violent temper. There were claims that I had burned bridges with everyone who ever tried to help me. And then came the comments. The internet is a volatile beast. It loves a hero, but it loves destroying a hero even more. The tide turned with terrifying speed. I knew her story was too good to be true, one user wrote. Another rich girl playing victim for clout wrote another. She capitalized on trauma she did not even have. Hashtag Sutton the liar. I watched the hashtag appear, then I watched it grow. It started with a few dozen tweets, then a few hundred. Within an hour, it was trending. My phone began to ring. It was not friends, it was investors. "We have a problem," Blair said, answering her other line. That was the representative from the department store chain. They are putting the spring order on hold. They say they cannot be associated with a brand under investigation for fraud. "I am not under investigation," I snapped. "My father is." "In the court of public opinion, you are the fraud," Blair said. "They do not care about facts, Sutton. They care about optics. And right now, the optics are that you are a liar who slandered her loving parents for profit." I felt a cold rage settle in my gut. It was different from the anger I felt at the party. That was the anger of a child who was hurt. This was the anger of a woman whose life's work was being dismantled by a boy who had never worked a day in his life. "Brooks needs money," I said. "The tabloid paid him for this story. 5 figures easily. Maybe 6. "It gets worse," Wyatt said. He was standing by the television in the corner of the studio. He had turned on the morning news. "You need to see this." I walked over. On the screen sat my mother, Eleanor Sterling. She was sitting on a beige couch on the set of the morning show. The lighting was soft and sympathetic. She was wearing a modest navy blue dress and a simple pearl necklace. She looked nothing like the woman who had worn gold silk and mocked me. She looked diminished. She looked frail. She looked like America's grandmother. The host leaned in with a face full of concern. "Eleanor," the host said, "it must be incredibly difficult for you to see your daughter achieving this level of success while spreading these lies about your family." Eleanor looked down at her hands. She dabbed at her eye with a tissue. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "We are just happy she is alive," Eleanor said. Her voice trembled perfectly. "For 8 years we did not know if she was dead or alive. We kept her room exactly as she left it. We prayed every night." "She claims you abandoned her," the host pressed. "She says you called her a mistake." Eleanor looked up. A single tear tracked down her cheek. "We were desperate," she said. "She was out of control. We tried to set boundaries. We tried to save her. Maybe we made mistakes. No parent is perfect. But we loved her. We still love her. We just want her to come home and get the help she needs." She looked directly into the camera. Her eyes were wet and pleading. "Sutton," she said, "if you are watching this, please, we forgive you. Just stop hurting us. We cannot take any more." I stared at the screen. I felt physically ill. The manipulation was absolute. She had taken the truth, twisted it until it snapped, and then wrapped herself in the wreckage. "She is good," Blair admitted quietly. "She is really good. She hits every note. The grieving mother, the forgiveness, the concern for your mental health. She makes you look like a monster without ever raising her voice." "She is lying," I said. "She never looked for me. She never called. She locked the credit card so I would starve." "But nobody knows that," Wyatt said. "The world sees a crying mother and a stony-faced daughter who got rich off a sob story." My phone buzzed again. It was an email from the venture capital firm that was supposed to back our expansion. Subject: funding pause. Dear Sutton, in light of recent allegations, we feel it is prudent to pause our discussions regarding the Series A funding round. We can revisit this once the public relations situation has stabilized. "They are choking us," I said. "They know they cannot win in court, so they are trying to starve us out. They want to destroy the brand, so I have no money left to fight them." "It is working," Blair said. "Our social media engagement has turned negative. We are losing followers by the minute. If we do not stop this, the brand will be toxic within a week." I looked at the television again. The segment was ending. The host was hugging Eleanor. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Heartbreak in High Fashion, a Mother's Plea." They had underestimated me once. They thought I would break when they called me a mistake. I had turned that pain into gold. Now they thought they could bury me with lies. They forgot one thing. I was the girl who sewed armor. I was the girl who stitched wounds with gold. And I was the girl who had kept every receipt. "Turn it off," I said. Wyatt clicked the remote. The screen went black. "What do we do?" Blair asked. "Do we issue a denial? Do we go on TV and call her a liar?" "No," I said. "A denial just makes it a he said, she said argument. People will believe the crying mother over the rich designer every time." I walked to my desk. I unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a small encrypted hard drive. It contained the digital archives of my life. But more importantly, it contained the file Blair had found, the file we had been saving for a rainy day. It was pouring now. "We do not argue with them," I said. "We do not debate them. We destroy them." I picked up the hard drive. It felt cool and heavy in my hand. "Brooks sold a story," I said. "He thinks he controlled the narrative, but he forgot that there are cameras everywhere these days, even 8 years ago." I looked at Blair. "You found the footage," I said, "from the catering company." "I did," Blair said. "It is grainy, the audio is a bit rough, but it is clear enough." "And you have the police report?" I asked. "From Brooks' arrest at college, the one they paid to seal." "I have the unredacted copy," Blair said. "A friend at the courthouse owed me a favor." "And the financial records?" I asked. "The ones showing Harrison's Ponzi scheme?" "All of it," Blair said. "We were saving it for the trial. If we release it now, we lose the element of surprise in court." "There will be no trial," I said. "If we let this drag on for months, my business will be dead. We have to end this now, tonight." I looked at Wyatt. "Set up the live stream," I said. "Not a press conference. I want to talk directly to the people. No filters, no hosts, just the truth." "You are going to use the nuclear option?" Wyatt asked. "They wanted a show," I said. "I'm going to give them a finale." I looked at the black screen where my mother's face had been. She had played the victim perfectly, but she had forgotten the most important rule of acting: never share the stage with someone who has nothing left to lose. "Get the projector," I said, "and get the hard drive. It is time to show the world what a real mistake looks like." The camera was a single unblinking eye mounted on a tripod in the center of the studio. It was pointed at a white wall where we had set up a projector screen. There were no stylists. There were no lighting crews. There was just me sitting on a wooden stool wearing the same black t-shirt I had worn to work that morning. "Are you sure about this?" Wyatt asked. He stood behind the laptop that controlled the live stream. His finger hovered over the enter key. "Once we do this, there is no going back. This is scorched earth." "The earth is already burning," I said. "They lit the match. I am just controlling the direction of the wind." I looked at Blair. She held the hard drive like it was a grenade. She nodded once. "We are live in 3, Wyatt said. 2, 1. The red light on the camera blinked on. I looked directly into the lens. I did not smile. I did not cry. I channeled every ounce of the cold, hard clarity that had kept me alive in storage rooms and bus stations for the last 8 years. "My name is Sutton Sterling," I said. "For the last 48 hours you have heard a story about a troubled girl who ran away from a loving home. You have heard my mother Eleanor Sterling weep on national television about her heartbreak. You have heard my brother Brooks claim I was a drug addict who terrorized my family." I paused. I let the silence hang heavy in the air. The viewer count on the screen was climbing. 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. The internet loves a train wreck, and tonight I was driving the locomotive. "They have called me a liar," I continued. "They have called me ungrateful. They have called me a mistake. But in the world of business and in the world of law, we do not rely on tears. We rely on evidence." I gestured to the screen behind me. 8 years ago, on the night I left home, my parents threw a party, I said. They claimed it was a private family dinner. They forgot that when you hire staff, you are never truly private. A server who was testing a new video camera for the event company recorded the speeches. She kept the footage, and yesterday she sent it to me. Blair hit a key. The video began to play. It was grainy and the lighting was yellow, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed the dining room of the Connecticut estate. It showed the crystal chandeliers and the white lilies. It showed my mother standing up in her gold dress. "And this is Sutton," the Eleanor on the screen said. Her voice was sharp and cruel. "Our wonderful mistake. 1% talent, 99% accident." I watched the viewer count spike to 200,000. The comments section, which had been full of hate moments ago, suddenly slowed down. Then came the laughter. The room on the screen roared with amusement. My father Harrison pointed his fork. "The one investment I cannot seem to cut my losses on." But the video did not stop there. This was the part the public had never heard. The footage showed me walking away. It showed me grabbing my coat near the door. And then it showed Brooks. My brother, the golden child, stood up. He was 17 years old and drunk on champagne and entitlement. He walked over to me. "You are ruining everything," the boy on the screen shouted. Then he shoved me. It was not a playful push. He slammed his hands into my chest with full force. I stumbled backward. My spine hit the heavy oak door frame with a sickening thud. I gasped for air, and then the most damning moment occurred. My mother did not rush to help me. My father did not scold him. My mother clapped. She stood there in her diamonds and silk, and she applauded her son for physically assaulting her daughter. Finally, someone said it. She laughed on the video. The screen went black. I turned back to the camera. "That," I said, pointing to the blank screen, "is the loving home I ran away from. I did not leave because I was on drugs. I left because I was in danger. And speaking of drugs, let us address the accusation my brother made about my addiction." Blair clicked the next file. A document appeared on the screen. It was an unredacted police report from the University of Pennsylvania dated 3 years ago. "This is the arrest record for Brooks Sterling," I said. "Possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, 3 ounces, $5,000 in cash found in his dorm room. He was not a user. He was a dealer." I let the image sit there. I let the world read the charges. I let them see the mugshot of the boy who had just sold a story to the tabloids calling me a junkie. "My parents paid to have this sealed," I said. "They made a donation to the athletic department, and the charges vanished. They called it a misunderstanding. But when I asked for $40 to buy a bus ticket to escape their abuse, they called the credit card company and reported it stolen to strand me in the cold." I took a breath. The studio was silent. Wyatt was staring at the monitor, his mouth a hard line. Blair looked grimly satisfied. "And finally," I said, "to the investors who are pulling their funding from my company because they fear fraud, you are looking at the wrong Sterling." The final slide appeared. It was a spreadsheet. It was complex, but the summary at the bottom was simple enough for anyone to understand. Blue Water Holdings, assets 0, liabilities $30 million. "My father, Harrison Sterling, has been running a Ponzi scheme for the last decade," I said. "He has defrauded teachers. He has defrauded retirees. He has used new investor money to pay for the Bentley he drives and the gold dress my mother wore while she mocked me. The bank is foreclosing on their home next week, not because I refused to help them, but because they stole money they could not pay back." I stood up. I walked closer to the camera until my face filled the frame. "I am not a victim," I said. "I am a survivor, and I am done being the secret they keep to protect their reputation. My name is Sutton Sterling. I created the Mistake brand to turn my trauma into armor. If you want to stand with the people who clap when a child is shoved into a wall, that is your choice. But do not call me a liar. I have the receipts." Wyatt cut the feed. The room plunged into silence. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. We just breathed. We had just dropped a bomb on my entire past. Then the noise began. It started with a low hum from the street outside. Then sirens. "Look at the news," Blair said. She pointed to the television. The news anchor who had interviewed my mother that morning was back on air. She looked pale. She was touching her earpiece, listening to a producer screaming instructions. "Breaking news," the anchor said. "We are receiving reports of a massive police presence at the Sterling estate in Connecticut. Following a live stream by fashion designer Sutton Sterling, the state attorney general has announced an immediate investigation into Harrison Sterling and Blue Water Holdings." The screen cut to a helicopter shot. It showed my parents' driveway. It was swarming. There were 3 police cruisers. There were 2 black SUVs with federal government plates. And there were news vans, dozens of them. The same media vultures that Eleanor had summoned to destroy me were now camped on her lawn waiting to film her destruction. "The stock for Harrison's shell company just hit 0, Wyatt said, looking at his phone. "It is gone. Delisted. The creditors are moving in. They are freezing everything." I looked at the helicopter footage. I saw the front door open. Harrison Sterling walked out. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing pajamas and a robe. He looked confused. He looked old. A federal agent stepped forward and handed him a piece of paper. Harrison staggered back. Then Eleanor appeared. She was still wearing the navy blue dress from her TV appearance. She looked at the cameras. She looked at the police. And then she looked up at the sky as if searching for someone to blame. She collapsed. It was not a performance this time. Her knees gave way, and she crumpled onto the pavement of the driveway she was about to lose. "The comments are turning," Blair said. "Look at Twitter. Look at Instagram. #apologize to Sutton is trending #1 globally. People are canceling their orders with the department stores that dropped you. The stores are already calling back. My email is exploding." I did not feel joy. I did not feel happiness. I felt a massive crushing weight lift off my chest, a weight I had been carrying since I was 17 years old. "They are finished," I said. "They are worse than finished," Blair said. "They are exposed. You stripped them naked in front of the whole world. They have no money. They have no reputation. And now they have the FBI knocking on their door." My phone rang. It was the landline again. The same number from Connecticut. I looked at it. "Do not answer it," Wyatt said. "No," I said. "I want to hear it." I picked up the receiver. I put it on speaker. There was silence on the other end, then a sound of ragged breathing. "Sutton," my father's voice croaked. He sounded like a man who had just been pulled from a shipwreck. "Sutton, please. The agents are here. They are taking the computers. They are talking about prison time." "I know," I said. "You have to stop this," he begged. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you exaggerated. We can fix this. We are your family." "You are not my family," I said. "You are the plaintiffs in a frivolous lawsuit, and I just submitted my evidence." "We will lose the house," he cried. "We will lose everything." "You lost everything the night you let me walk to that bus station," I said. "You just didn't realize it until now." "Sutton, please," he sobbed. It was a pathetic sound. "What do you want? We will do anything." I looked at Blair. She nodded. She pulled a fresh document from her briefcase. The contract we had prepared. The unconditional surrender. "If you want my help," I said into the phone, "you will get it on my terms. But not today. Today you sit in the mess you made. Today you watch the news and see exactly what the world thinks of a mother who claps when her daughter is hurt." "Sutton, no," he wailed. "Goodbye, Harrison," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen where the helicopter was still circling the house where I was born, the house where I died, and the house that would soon belong to me. "Is it over?" Wyatt asked. "No," I said. "The war is over. Now comes the occupation." I turned to Blair. "Call the bank," I said. "Find out when the auction is. I want that house, and I want to make sure that when they are evicted, I am the one holding the keys." Blair smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "Consider it done," she said. I walked to the window and looked out at the lights of Brooklyn. I was tired. I was empty, but I was clean. The stain of their lies had been washed away by the truth. I was Sutton Sterling. and I had just proven that the only mistake they made was thinking I would stay quiet forever. The view from the 45th floor of my Manhattan office was designed to intimidate. The entire south wall was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the skyline that stretched all the way to the Statue of Liberty. It was a view that cost $60 a square foot. It was a view that said I had won. I stood with my back to the room, watching the gray clouds roll in over the Hudson River. Behind me, the heavy mahogany doors opened. "They are here," Blair said. Her voice was devoid of emotion. I turned around. 3 people walked into the conference room. For a moment, I did not recognize them. The image of the powerful Sterling family had been burned into my mind for so long that seeing the reality was jarring. Harrison Sterling was not wearing a suit. He was wearing wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that looked 2 sizes too big for his shrinking frame. His skin was gray and pasty. He walked with a shuffle, his shoulders hunched, as if he expected a blow to land at any moment. Brooks was worse. My brother, the golden boy, looked like a skeleton wrapped in expensive streetwear. His eyes were bloodshot and darting around the room looking for an exit, or perhaps looking for something to steal. He was shaking. It was the subtle tremor of withdrawal. And Eleanor. My mother wore oversized sunglasses indoors. When she took them off, her eyes were swollen and rimmed with red. Her hair, usually lacquered into a perfect helmet, was limp and pulled back into a messy knot. She clutched her handbag to her chest like a shield. They looked like refugees from a war they had started. I did not offer them a seat. I stood at the head of the long glass table flanked by Blair and Wyatt. We were the tribunal. They were the accused. "Sutton," my mother breathed. She took a step forward, reaching out a trembling hand. "Oh, thank God. You look wonderful. You look so strong." "Sit down," I said. My voice was not loud, but they obeyed instantly. They collapsed into the leather chairs on the opposite side of the table. They looked small against the vastness of the room. "We did not know who else to call," Harrison said. His voice was a rasp. "The lawyers left. Miller and Finch quit yesterday when the retainer check bounced. The FBI froze the accounts this morning. We cannot even buy groceries." "That sounds like a difficult situation," I said. "But I am confused. According to your lawsuit, you are the aggrieved party. Surely you should be celebrating the fact that justice is being served." Harrison winced. He looked down at the table. "Please," he whispered. "Do not mock us. We are ruined, Sutton. They are talking about indictment. They are talking about racketeering charges. If we do not get legal representation, we are going to prison." "And the house," Eleanor added, her voice rising in panic. "The bank gave us notice, 72 hours. They are going to put our things on the curb. The neighbors are watching. It is humiliating." "Humiliation is a powerful teacher," I said. "I learned a lot from it when I was 17. Eleanor let out a sob. She slid out of her chair. It was not a graceful movement. She sank to her knees on the plush carpet of my office. She clasped her hands together in a gesture of prayer. "I am begging you," she cried. "We are your parents. We made mistakes, horrible mistakes, but we are blood. We are family. You cannot let them put us in cages. You cannot let us starve." I looked at the woman kneeling on the floor. This was the woman who had clapped when I was shoved. This was the woman who had laughed at my pain. "Get up," I said coldly. "You look pathetic." She scrambled back into her chair, wiping her face. "You want my help?" I said. "You want me to pay for your lawyers. You want me to save you from homelessness. And you want me to keep Brooks out of jail for the drugs." "Yes," Harrison said. "We will pay you back. Once I get back on my feet, once the market turns around, I swear on my life I will pay you back every cent." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "You have no feet to get back on Harrison," I said. "Your career is over. Your reputation is ash. You will never manage another dollar of anyone's money again. There is no paying me back." I nodded to Blair. She lifted a heavy black binder from the floor and dropped it onto the glass table. It landed with a thud that made Brooks jump. "This is not a loan," I said. "This is a purchase. I am buying your lives." "What is that?" Brooks asked, eyeing the binder. "Blair calls it the redemption contract," I said. I prefer to call it the price of admission. If you want my money, you sign this. If you do not sign, you walk out that door, and I let the FBI and the bank tear you apart." Harrison reached for the binder. His hands shook as he opened it. "Read the terms," I said. "Read them out loud." Harrison stared at the first page. He swallowed hard. "Clause 1, he read. "Public admission of guilt. The undersigned agree to participate in a filmed apology to be distributed on all social media platforms owned by Sutton Sterling. The apology must be scripted by the Sterling brand team. We must admit to child neglect, financial fraud, and defamation. We must retract all statements made to the press and admit they were lies. On every platform," I clarified. "You will tell the world exactly what you did. No tears, no excuses, just the facts." Eleanor gasped. "But our friends, the club, they will never speak to us again." "They already stopped speaking to you," I said. "Read the next clause." Harrison turned the page. He paled. "Clause 2, he read. "Liquidation of assets. All remaining personal property, including jewelry, art vehicles, and clothing, will be sold to pay restitution to the victims of the Blue Water Holdings scheme. The residential property located in Connecticut will be purchased by Sutton Sterling." He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "You are buying the house," he asked, "so we can stay." "Keep reading," I said. "The previous owners," he read, his voice trembling, "are permanently barred from entering the premises. They must vacate immediately upon closing. Sutton Sterling retains sole ownership and usage rights." "I am buying it to gut it," I said. "I am going to turn it into a shelter for at-risk youth, kids who were kicked out by parents like you. You will never set foot inside that door again." "Where will we live?" Eleanor wailed. "We have nowhere." "We will get to that," I said. "Read Clause 3. This one is for Brooks." Brooks looked up. He looked terrified. "Clause 3, Harrison read. "Mandatory rehabilitation. Brooks Sterling will be admitted to the Turning Point facility for a period of no less than 2 years. 2 years, Brooks shouted. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "No way. I am not going to prison. I can do outpatient. I can stop whenever I want." "Turning Point is not a spa, Brooks," I said. "It is a lockdown facility. No phones, no internet, no visitors for the first 6 months. You are going to get clean whether you like it or not. And if you leave early—" I paused, looking him in the eye. "I hand the unredacted police report to the district attorney, and you go to federal prison for distribution." Brooks sank back into his chair. He put his head in his hands. "And finally," I said, "Clause 4, the employment mandate." Harrison stared at the page. He squinted as if the words were written in a foreign language. "Employment," he whispered. "But I cannot work in finance. The SEC banned me." "I know," I said. "That is why you are not working in finance. You are working for me." "Clause 4, he read slowly. "Harrison Sterling will be employed as a data entry specialist level 1 for the Mistake brand. Duties include invoice processing and inventory logging. Eleanor Sterling will be employed as a fulfillment associate in the Brooklyn Distribution Center." Eleanor screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure horror. "A warehouse!" she shrieked. "You want me to work in a warehouse, packing boxes, like a servant, like an employee," I corrected. "You will work 8-hour shifts. You will stand on your feet. You will tape boxes of the clothes that you mocked. You will earn minimum wage plus benefits." "I cannot do that," she cried. "I am 55 years old. I have bad knees. I cannot be seen doing manual labor. It is cruel, Sutton. It is vindictive." "It is honest work," I said. "It is the kind of work I did for 8 years while you were getting massages. It puts food on the table. And speaking of benefits, that brings us to the final stipulation." I walked around the table until I stood directly behind them. "You are old," I said, "and you are stressed. Harrison has high blood pressure. Eleanor, you have that heart condition you always complain about. You need health insurance. You need prescriptions." "Yes," Harrison said, "we do." "My company offers excellent health insurance," I said. "Full coverage. but it is only for active employees. If you quit, if you complain, if you are late 3 times, if you refuse to pack a single box, you are fired. I leaned down close to my father's ear. And if you are fired, you lose the insurance. You lose the apartment I am renting for you. You lose the legal defense team I am paying for. You lose everything. I straightened up and walked back to my side of the table. So, I said, "Here is the pen." I placed a heavy silver fountain pen on top of the binder. "You can sign it and live a hard, humble life," I said. "Or you can walk out and face the consequences of your own actions alone." The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the ragged breathing of 3 people realizing their lives were over. Eleanor looked at Harrison. Harrison looked at Brooks. They were trapped. They were trapped by their own greed. They were trapped by their own incompetence. And they were trapped by the daughter they had underestimated. Harrison reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "We are family," he whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. "How can you do this to family?" "I am doing this because I am the only one who cares enough to make you useful," I said. "I am saving you from prison, Harrison. You should be thanking me." He uncapped the pen. He signed his name. It was a scrawl. It looked like the signature of a dying man. He passed the pen to Eleanor. She wept as she signed. She dropped tears onto the page, blurring the ink. Then she pushed it to Brooks. Brooks looked at me with pure hatred. "I hate you," he said. "I know," I said. "Use that. Use that anger in rehab. Maybe it will help you survive." He signed. Blair stepped forward and took the binder. She checked the signatures. She nodded to me. "It is done," she said. "Wyatt," I said. "Call the car. Take Brooks to the facility immediately. They are expecting him." "Wait!" Eleanor cried, reaching for her son. "Can we say goodbye? Can we have a moment?" "You had 18 years of moments," I said. "You wasted them. Go." Wyatt put a hand on Brooks's shoulder. He guided him out of the room. Brooks did not fight. He looked broken. "Blair will give you the address of your new apartment," I told my parents. "It is a 2-bedroom walk-up in Queens. It is clean. It is safe. It is small. The bus stop is 2 blocks away. You start work on Monday at 8 in the morning. Do not be late." Harrison stood up. He looked at me one last time. "You are cold, Sutton," he said. "You are ice cold." "I learned from the best," I said. I turned my back on them and looked out the window again. I watched the rain hitting the glass. Behind me I heard the heavy doors close. I was alone in my tower. I had bought their silence. I had bought their compliance. And I had bought their future. It did not feel like happiness, but it felt like justice. And for the first time in 8 years, the ghost of the girl in the bus station was quiet. The air in the room was heavy with the scent of ink and desperation. Harrison held the fountain pen above the paper. His hand was trembling. It looked like the hand of a defeated man. He took a breath and looked up at me. His eyes were wet, but there was something else behind the tears, something sharp and calculating that did not match the pathetic slump of his shoulders. "I will sign," Harrison said, his voice shaking. "But I need you to admit something first, Sutton. I need you to admit that you are enjoying this. You are doing this to hurt us, aren't you? You want to see us suffer because you are vindictive." I narrowed my eyes. It was a strange thing to say. It felt rehearsed. It felt like a line from a bad movie. "I am doing this to solve a problem, Harrison," I said calmly. "The problem is you. Just sign the papers." "No," he insisted. He lowered the pen, but kept his other hand tucked inside his windbreaker jacket. "I want to hear you say it. Say that you hate us. Say that you are using your money to destroy your own family because you are a cruel person. Just say it, Sutton. Admit that you are the monster here." He was pushing. He was baiting me. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to deliver a soundbite that painted me as the aggressor and him as the victim. I opened my mouth to tell him exactly what I thought of his cheap psychology. "Harrison," Wyatt said. His voice was like a whip crack. Wyatt stepped forward from the wall. He moved with a speed that startled everyone. He did not look at me. He was looking at Harrison's chest. Specifically, he was looking at the faint rectangular outline in the inner pocket of Harrison's jacket. A tiny red light blinked through the thin fabric. "Stand up," Wyatt commanded. "What?" Harrison stammered. "I'm just trying to have a conversation with my daughter." Wyatt did not wait. He reached across the table. He grabbed the lapel of Harrison's jacket and jerked him forward. Harrison yelped. Wyatt reached into the pocket and pulled out a cell phone. The screen was bright. The voice memo app was open. The timer was running. A red waveform danced across the screen, capturing every word we had spoken. "You are recording this," Wyatt said. He held the phone up for me to see. "He is trying to entrap you. He wanted you to lose your temper so he could edit the tape and leak it. He wanted to blackmail you." I looked at the phone. Then I looked at Harrison. His face had gone from pathetic to terrified in the span of a heartbeat. He shrank back into his chair. He looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. Harrison sputtered. "I just wanted a record. For my lawyers. It is my right." "New York is a one-party consent state," Blair said, her voice icy. "But our office has a strict no-recording policy, which you consented to when you signed in at security. And trying to manufacture evidence for extortion purposes is a felony, Harrison. Another felony." I felt the anger rise up in my chest, hot and violent. But I did not let it reach my face. I remembered who I was. I was the ocean. I was the one who set the tides. I forced the corners of my mouth upward. I smiled. It was a smile devoid of any warmth. It was the smile a predator gives right before it snaps the neck of its prey. "You really are a fool," I said softly. "You are sitting in the wreckage of your life. You are seconds away from federal indictment. I offered you a lifeboat. And instead of climbing in, you tried to drill a hole in the bottom." I reached out and took the binder from the table, the contract I had spent hours drafting, the contract that guaranteed them a safe apartment and medical care. I gripped the paper with both hands. Rip! The sound was loud in the silent room. I tore the front page in half, then I tore the next one. I ripped the redemption contract into shreds and let the pieces flutter down onto the glass table like snow. "That was your mercy," I said, "and you just wasted it." "Sutton, no!" Eleanor screamed. She lunged for the pieces. "He did not mean it. He is stupid. Please do not do this." "Blair," I said without looking away from my father, "open the file. Make the amendments. Clause 5 and Clause 6. "On it," Blair said. She was already typing on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "What amendments?" Harrison whispered. He looked like he was going to be sick. "You tried to play a game, Harrison," I said. "But you forgot that I own the board. Because of your dishonesty, the price of my help just went up. This is the stupidity tax." The printer in the corner of the room whirred to life. It spat out 5 fresh pages of heavy bond paper. Blair grabbed them. She stapled them with a sharp metallic clack and slid the new document across the table. "Read it," I commanded. Harrison looked at the paper. He could barely focus his eyes. "Clause 5. I said, my voice hard as diamond. "Revocation of visitation. Due to the demonstrated lack of moral character in the parental unit, all visitation rights for Brooks Sterling at the Turning Point facility are hereby revoked for the duration of his 2-year stay. You will not see him. You will not speak to him. He will go through his recovery without your toxic influence." "You cannot do that," Eleanor wailed. "He is my baby. 2 years. I will die." "You should have thought of that before your husband tried to blackmail me," I said. "Read Clause 6. Harrison read it. His face turned gray. "Housing allowance adjustment," he read. "The housing stipend is hereby reduced by 50%. The plaintiffs will be housed in a studio apartment in the basement level. Utilities are the sole responsibility of the tenant." 50%, Harrison gasped. "A basement. Sutton, please. I have claustrophobia. I cannot live in a basement." "Better a basement in Queens than a cell in federal prison," I said. "Those are the new terms. They are non-negotiable, and if you hesitate for even 1 second, if you look at me the wrong way, if you blink, I will tear this one up too, and you can sleep on a park bench tonight." I leaned over the table. "Sign it," I hissed. "Now." Harrison looked at me. He looked at the phone in Wyatt's hand. He looked at the shredded paper on the table. He knew he had lost. He knew there were no more moves to make. He was a man who had spent his life bluffing with empty hands, and he had finally run into a player who held all the aces. He picked up the pen. He did not argue. He did not try to negotiate. He shook so hard that the pen scratched against the paper. He signed his name. He pushed the paper to Eleanor. She was sobbing quietly, a broken sound that filled the room. She signed. I took the document. I checked the signatures. "Get out of my office," I said. "Blair will email you the address of the basement. Do not be late for work on Monday." They stood up. They looked like ghosts. They shuffled toward the door without looking back. When the door clicked shut, I let out a long breath. I looked at the shredded paper on the table. "Burn it," I said to Wyatt. "Burn all of it." The house in Connecticut was silent. For 18 years, I had known this silence as a weapon. It was the silence of judgment. It was the silence of secrets kept behind closed doors. But today, the silence felt different. It felt like a blank canvas. I stood in the center of the foyer. The crystal chandelier was gone. I had sold it. The heavy oil paintings of ancestors I never knew were gone. I had donated them. The house was stripped down to its bones. It smelled of fresh paint and sawdust instead of lilies and lies. I walked to the front door. The heavy oak frame still bore the faint indentation where my brother had shoved me into the wood 8 years ago. I ran my finger over the mark. It was just a scratch now. It was no longer a wound. I stepped outside. A team of contractors was mounting a new sign next to the entrance. It was made of brushed steel. The letters were clean and modern. The Mistake Foundation. Below the name was a simple mission statement: art, shelter, future. This was not my home anymore. It was a sanctuary. Next week, 12 teenagers would move into the bedrooms upstairs. They were kids who had been kicked out for being too loud or too queer or too difficult. They were the mistakes of other families. Here they would learn to design. They would learn to sew. They would learn that being a mistake was just the first draft of becoming a masterpiece. I got into my car. It was a sleek black sedan that I had bought with cash. I drove down the long driveway. I did not look back. I did not need to haunt this place. I had exorcised the ghosts by buying the castle. I drove toward the highway, but I made a detour. I drove past the industrial park on the edge of town. It was a sprawling complex of gray concrete buildings. I slowed down as I passed the distribution center for the Mistake brand. Through the chain-link fence, I could see the loading dock. A line of workers in gray uniforms was packing boxes onto a truck. They moved with a rhythmic efficiency. I saw her. Eleanor Sterling was standing near the conveyor belt. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She wore no makeup. She looked older. She looked tired. She was taping a box with a tape gun. Zip, cut, zip, cut. She looked up as my car idled at the stop sign. Her eyes locked onto mine through the tinted glass. For a second, her hand raised. It was a reflex. It was the wave of a mother who forgot she was an employee. "Sterling," a supervisor shouted. He was a young man with a clipboard. "Less waving, more packing. We have a quota." Eleanor flinched. She dropped her hand. She looked at the supervisor. Then she looked back at the box. She bowed her head and went back to work. She was exactly where she belonged. She was useful. She was earning her keep. And she was finally understanding the value of $1. I pressed the gas pedal. The car surged forward, leaving the warehouse behind. I drove back to the city. I drove back to the loft in Brooklyn that smelled of garlic and roasting chicken. Wyatt was there. He was wearing a t-shirt covered in flour. He kissed me when I walked in. We sat at our small kitchen table. There were no white tablecloths. There were no crystal flutes. There were just 2 plates of food and a bottle of cheap wine that tasted better than anything my father had ever poured. "How was the house?" Wyatt asked. "It is ready," I said. "And your parents?" he asked. "They are working," I said. "They are surviving." I took a sip of wine. I looked around the room. It was messy. It was real. It was mine. I thought about the girl on the bus. I thought about the knife in my pocket. I thought about the gold thread. They had tried to break me. They had tried to erase me. But in the end, they had only carved me into something unbreakable. I was not just a survivor. I was the architect of my own justice. And that was the most expensive thing I owned. Family is often described as an anchor. But we forget that an anchor can either hold you steady in a storm or drag you down to the bottom of the ocean. The most dangerous lie we are told is that shared blood demands shared destruction. It does not. Loyalty without reciprocity is just self-betrayal in a pretty wrapper. My mistake wasn't being born. It was believing for too long that I needed their permission to exist. Real peace isn't given to you by the people who broke you. It is something you build brick by brick from the rubble they left behind. Sometimes the highest form of self-love is walking away and locking the door.